So is $1 million enough to retire on? So $1 million, as we know, has always been a big mythical aspirational number, in the sense that it's not very easy to sort of get to accumulate that kind of money. But then again, it's not a lot of money considering the situation or the interest rate environment we find ourselves in, right? And let me tell you why. Okay. Charles Schwab, as we know, is that big brokerage firm. They also have a retirement plan services division which manages retirement plans for employers. Basically, they manage retirement plans for you and me. In case you have Schwab as the 401k or a 403b or a 457b plan manager, right? Now, of course, depending upon what type of employer you work at, you might have access to a 401k or a 403b or 457b, right? But they structurally are all the same. They have the same logistical sort of mechanisms as to how you sort of save, what you invest in most of the time, and how you sort of take money out of that account, right? So it's a type of account, and they surveyed their participants. It's a recent survey. They say they need $1.9 million. So the survey participants said that gone are the days of $1 million. Now we need $1.9 million. So let's round it off to $2 million. Okay. So what does it really mean to sort of have $2 million as a nest egg to sort of retire on? Okay. Let's say you're 65. By the way, this is just a chit chat, though it is a unidirectional chit chat. Someday, hopefully, we can do bi-directional, but for now, it's a unidirectional chit chat where I am just talking and blabbering, and whatever you want to take out of it, you can take out of it. But going back to this 4% rule, okay, it's not a rule, it's a rule of thumb, okay. There is no such thing as a rule in terms of planning for your retirement, okay, in the sense that there are so many variables which can sort of change and influence as to how much income can you draw from your plan. But what 4% rule says is that assuming you have a $2 million nest egg, you're 65, with an anticipated life expectancy, worst case or best case, depending upon how you look at it, of 100 years, you can technically draw 4% from that money, from that nest egg, each and every year, inflation adjusted every year. That means every year the inflation is, the cost of living is going up. You can sort of draw more and more money, and you, in theory, will not run out of that nest egg. Okay, so that's the sort of rule of thumb. That's the rule. That's what they call the 4% rule. And as you can expect, a lot of these things come out of work done by technically geeks. Okay, so William Benjamin, okay, back in 1994, he came up with this 4% rule, and of course, as you expect, he was an engineer before that, who later on became a financial planner or financial advisor. Okay, who is, I think, is retired now. That's what his Wikipedia page says. But so he came about with that rule back in 1994. And it was a very comfortable rule to sort of come up with back in that day, and let me tell you why. Okay, so this rule came about based on a portfolio which was a mix of stock bond portfolio, a reasonable stock bond portfolio, a mix of stocks and bond. When I say bond, you're basically a lender to a government, to a corporation. Anytime you buy a bond, you basically become a lender. And you could, in theory, back in the day in 1994, you could lend to federal government, okay, and expect a 7.8% rate of return every year for 10-year time frame if you were to buy a 10-year treasury bond, okay. What is that same bond yielding these days, okay? That same bond is yielding 1.4%, okay. So it's almost 5x, right? So 15 times 4 is 6, almost 5x, okay. So you need 5x more money to make the same kind of income you were able to make you need 5x more today than you needed in 1994. So what does that in theory mean? What that in theory means is that now you have to expose your money or your portfolio to more volatility. That means you cannot just rely on that same mix of stocks and bonds as you did in 1994 and right through, right? You need to sort of be willing to expose your money to more volatility, which is okay, but it's not comfortable. Okay, so it's okay but not comfortable. Okay, and it's not like back in the day in 1994 the inflation rate was super high, because if I were to Google this 1994 inflation rate, okay, sorry, 1994 inflation rate is 2.56%. Okay, so it's not like the so one case you can make is that the reason the bonds were yielding what they were yielding back then was because inflation rate was very high, but it's not the case. And these days the inflation is crazy. Okay, I they say it's transitory. That it's going to eventually, when the supply chain bottlenecks sort of uh, iron themselves out, things will go back to normal, which is normal is low inflation, but we'll see. Okay, but at present inflation rate is not comfortable. Okay, so even with that, so basically you are earning less than the rate of inflation, because rate today the numbers came out, it's around 6% inflation rate, right, annualized. So so clearly we are not living in a very comfortable environment from the retirement planning perspective. But again, if you're 65, $2 million in your nest egg, and you expect to draw 4% from that money, and let me go back to that thing. Okay, 4%, $80,000 at 65 is still a lot of money, because you're of course very close to, or you're already collecting Social Security. So that plus Social Security will put you north of $100,000, and that is growing with inflation every year. Most of your major life expenses are behind you. You likely are not paying, your mortgage is paid off, so you're not likely not paying for shelter. You're likely not paying for any college costs, because your kids are probably done with school and out of your home, right? Out on their own. So you basically have a lot of money to live on. Of course, you're going to spend some money on travel, unless you are into private jets and all. $80,000 plus whatever Social Security income you're going to collect is still a lot of money. Okay. Uh, and of course, healthcare is going to be a big expense, but it's not as big a deal, assuming that you have done a reasonable enough job of taking care of yourself through your work life, right? But so let me go back to that. And what if you want to sort of call it quits at 50? Let's say you're sitting on that same $2 million, and you want to sort of quit at 50. And quit means you might want to do something else with your life, and not worry about what that something else pays, right? So that's what I sort of define quitting, because assuming that same 100-year life expectancy, 50 years of living and sitting at home and watching TV is not going to cut it, right? So of course you're going to find something else to do, and you will want to do something else, right? But assuming you want to call it quit at 50, that $2 million at 50 might be a very big stretch for almost everyone. But there are folks who can sort of do it, especially folks in high paying careers and who have done a reasonable enough job of setting money aside into all these different retirement planning vehicles and all those things, right? So assuming you have done a reasonable job, I think still doable. Start work at 25, save and invest for 25 years, and by the time you're 50, you're sitting at $2 million. But then you have this 50 years of life left in front of ahead of you, right? So you might want to be a little bit more conservative. Okay, I would say 3% is more realistic. I would say it's still a little bit aggressive, but I think you can make it happen. And of course, you can adjust as time goes along. But $3 million, of course, doesn't buy you as much income, or 3% does not buy you as much income as 4% does from that same nest egg, right? So you are going to only be able to draw $60,000. And the other problem with retiring at 50, or I wouldn't say problem, but I would say that you still might have other expenses, major expenses still continuing in your life, right? So for example, you might still be paying for college expenses for your kids if you do have kids. You might still be paying some mortgage on your home if you basically held your home for a long time, right? So you still are paying those costs, and on top of that you're paying to live on, right? Plus health insurance and all those things. So it's not very comfortable to do it, but assuming you want to do it, and if you're living in a part of the country where you can sort of afford to make it happen, then sure, you can sort of do it at 50, because again it all comes down to, as Mary Oliver is, she was a poet. I think she passed away recently. As she says, tell me what is it you plan to do with your one wild and very precious life, right? So if you have other, if you hate what you're doing, and if you want to sort of do something else with your life, and these days, with people living so much longer, you might want to sort of plan for 2, 3, depending upon what your interests are, different types of careers, and regardless of how much they pay, so that's why, when you have done a decent enough job of sort of planning through your younger years, setting money aside into the right set of investments, I think it gives you all this kind of flexibilities later on in your life to to sort of decide what you do with what you want to do with the time you have left on this planet. Okay. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time. We'll talk again.